Welcome to part 2 of this interview. So I wanted to talk a little bit about accredited buyers representation. This accreditation I've also done as well. And it's funny because it's in the United States, right, where you took that accreditation. And but it's so interesting because the skills that you learn translate anywhere in the world that you're doing business, because it really is about putting the buyer, when a buyer is coming into a different area, an area now is a different country, Belize for you. So will you talk a little bit about that accreditation and how you're applying that in Belize now?
Welcome to the Jennifer J. Hammond Podcast. Jennifer is a licensed realtor, educator, speaker, and best-selling author. Jennifer's goal is to help you find your yay in every day.
So how would you find listings in this kind of environment where everybody is not sharing? How do you find out?
Goodness, that's a great question. Can you imagine that if, I'm speaking to a client and they specifically want to have a resort for sale, I literally have to go and scour lots of websites. And then I have to discern there is a certain website in Belize, and I will leave it nameless, but they tout that they have like a multiple listing. And those listings on there are years and years and years old, and they never come down when they're sold. And you don't get to talk to the agent. It goes to one person who decides if they pass your information on to the agent. And it makes it very challenging because people will send me links going, well, what about this one? And I'm like, again, that website has old listings. It is not for sale. Here's the name of the resort. You can see it's open and active. They're not selling. And the other thing is that if I scour all these different, websites, I have to have a good handle of which companies I know are good about making sure they manage their listings on their page, which is not always easy to do. You have to have lots of experience. And so I think that's our benefit. Plus we have our own we're Keller Williams Belize. We have our own agents that we know what they've sold, what's available, and we know that they're required, by the way, to have an actual listing with a listing agreement, with the title, with the map, all of those important documentation things, so that when another agent asks us for stuff, we can just pass it over.
Right.
A lot easier. It's just easy to do it right the first time. I really am a proponent of that. Why play around?
And why make it more difficult? But again, I think a lot of times when people have been doing it one way for a long time, it's very hard to change. I think that's true, whether it's your personal life or your business life, it makes it very difficult to kind of change. It's like that ship that has to kind of change directions, and it happens very slowly. And again, you have to really help people understand the benefits to changing, that it's enough of a benefit that they would change. Oh my gosh. And I feel your pain because I've done it before, like I said, down in the Caribbean, and realized that it's a really interesting experience because it just seems so obvious to me. Well, if you share the listing, then I can help bring you the buyer.
Yes.
Wouldn't that be a benefit?
Yes, it's a we get a lot of buyers. So, I will call an agent going, we have buyers. You open up that listing, we'll show it. And we do have a lot of companies now that will let us show their listings, which is wonderful. Actually, I don't think we have any that are refused to do it because we're a little tenacious.
Which is the way you need to be. So talk about that, because I always wanted to find words. So you were talking about an open listing or a closed listing. What does that mean?
So a lot of the agencies will have, sellers don't feel that a lot of their agents work hard for them. We have to do marketing. We have to do a lot of work. We have to be talking to people. We have to be out there actively promoting their property, right? That's our job. Right. If you have a listing, right? And many just don't do that. They'll come in and check their computer and go, nobody today. Let me go and do this instead. Nobody's emailed me. Well, we know that doesn't work that way, right? It just doesn't. So what a lot of sellers choose to do is they'll want to list with 10 different companies. That means they have 10 different companies doing, minimal for them, right? They're putting a listing up and checking to see if somebody happens to email them about it. And that's not the way to get proper representation. I'm really fastidious about, if you're going to sell your property, you must have a professional representing you and that is working for you. And if they're not working for you, find someone that will work for you.
Right. I was thinking about, there are just so many, there are just so many benefits to sharing information.
Yes.
But again, like I said, if it's not the way that you've done business, and in Belize, as well as, like I said, many other places in the world, it's very different when you're sharing information, and it's a different kind of competition, and it's done in a different way. So, so I wanted to talk a little bit about accredited buyers representation. This accreditation I've also done as well, and it's funny because it's in the United States, right, where you took that accreditation.
Right.
And but it's so interesting because the skills that you learn translate anywhere in the world that you're doing business, because it really is about putting the buyer, when a buyer is coming into a different area, an area now is a different country, Belize for you. So will you talk a little bit about that accreditation and how you're applying that in Belize now?
Absolutely. So to start in 2004, when I looked at property, they're open listings, especially back then, there was not hardly exclusives at all. And I started my business because I looked with three different gentlemen at one property. I didn't tell them I'd already seen it. I just listened. Each gentleman had a different price. I was not thrilled that I was being taken advantage of. I am a mom with children. I have limited funds. I need to know that I'm getting represented. I need to know that someone's looking out for me. And then coming to find out, when I spoke to Daniel Silva, who used to be political minister in the country, and I'm living on their property with my 10 animals and my 2 teenagers, right? So I'm in a hurry to buy my house. I want to buy my own house. I have to have my own house, right? I don't want to stay in their resort. And even though they were friends, right? But I want to make sure I have my place for the animals, of course, and the kids. So when I came back and complained to them, they said, that's just normal. Things are just, anyone can sell whatever they want at whatever price they want to, not what the seller wants. And then the seller pays commission, but what the seller wants, and then add on whatever they want to for commission. I was horrified because, again, going back to my mother, I knew better. I knew that there was not proper representation. I knew I was not being serviced. I wasn't being told the truth. And so when I complained to this gentleman, he says, you know what? You've got a point. You are not being taken care of. I said, I know I'm right. He says, you know what, young lady? How nice of him. I have 17 properties. I'm going to give them to you, and you go start a business and do it differently. Oh. And I had only been in the country 2 weeks.
Wow.
So that was when the universe obviously brought that to me, going, I'll take that challenge.
Yeah,
I will do this. I will do this. So if people want to do the research and find representation and have people dedicated to it and willing to speak up and do the right thing, then they'll find the right people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, what a blessing. And that was definitely the universe saying, okay, you're supposed to be in Belize with your family and your 10 animals.
Yes. Who would have ever thought, right? And, I look back going, wow, that was really, I just moved with faith, right? I just knew that I was supposed to be doing something. I didn't know what, but it came pretty quickly.
That's an amazing story. I love that part of the story. And I think it's really interesting what you said is, when all of a sudden you, and I would have probably done the same thing, had 3 different people show you the same property and have 3 different prices. And that feeling of people being not trustworthy. Every single one of us at some point has been betrayed, either personally or in business. And I swear that feeling, as soon as that feeling kind of wells up in you, you're just ready to fight because you don't want to be taken advantage of. I mean, you don't. And I think it's so, again, that's part of the thing of trying to figure out how can we create a win-win-win in real estate, no matter where we are in the world. And so I love what you're doing there. The other thing is, so I'm curious as well. So if a buyer comes down to Belize and they're looking at the different options. So now do you think that they're still doing where they come down and they're looking for multiple realtors, or do they stick with one?
So I find that when we speak with people that they really see that the benefit of them having to not scour a bunch of websites, that they're not going to know if it's priced right. They're not going to know if it's even available. They're not going to know what the truth is. They're seeing the value, that going, you know what, I'm hanging my hat with you. Help me through the process. And the nice thing is we personally like to, with Keller Williams, I can only speak to Keller Williams. We want to make sure that people get the information of, now what are they going to do that they've moved to Belize, or now what are they going to do that they have this investment property? It's not just buying a property, it's much more, because they don't know the school districts, they don't know any of this information, right? It's completely new. Or what area is best suited for expats that want to have a chance to be by the sea but yet not spend a ton of money. And there's a lot of things to consider. And so I'm seeing that people are getting, I don't want to say more educated, but more, I guess, more aware of that there's choices that they can get representation.
Well, so we talk about international real estate in this way, where if you're looking at Belize as one of the possible places. So if somebody is thinking about doing what you did and just moving there, we talked a little bit about the medical. We've talked a little bit about, obviously the beaches and the fun stuff, but also, and we talked about the food, amazing food and fresh vegetables and fresh fruits and stuff like that. But so let's talk a little bit about schools. What about, because you moved there with your kids. So what's it like to live there? And what is the schooling like?
Very good question. So I actually am working with a family right now that we're discerning the property based on which location the schools are in that they want to be near, right? And there's some private schools in two different separate areas that are going to work for them, right? So then it's finding that first, then it's finding the property, right? We can always find the property, but it's finding where does your soul sing, or what is important to you? In this case, their children and their schooling is important. So some people do come in and homeschool. The majority like the benefit, like I did, of having the children into mainstream, into the schools, because they're really small. The classrooms are small. We only have a little bit over 350,000 people in the whole country.
Wow.
Right? The whole entire country. So the schools are not big, huge schools like we would be used to in the North Americas. It's completely different, where, you have like a kindergarten to, for example, 8th grade, and there might be 250, students in the whole school. So, picking the right school matters anywhere in the world, right? But in Belize especially.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons I asked it is because, in the United States, as you know, from being a realtor in the United States first, is that a lot of people do choose it. Now, it's interesting with the pandemic that we've had so many people decide to do some kind of, and I want to use the word virtual schooling. And I'm curious if that's also something that it's become more popular in your area of the world, in your corner of Belize. Are people also doing that?
There is a handful of people that are choosing to do homeschooling completely. And then there's some that are doing regular schooling, and then they're also adding some homeschooling proponents. And my daughter, one of my daughters specifically, she went into school in the mainstream, and then she chose to do her junior and senior year virtually. And this was back in 2005, so it was quite some time ago. She chose to do it virtually, and she did all her book work and passed every month, sent a package in, and excelled with a 4.0 and graduated. But that was her choice to do that. And the schooling, it was different for her. There's Caribbean history, right? There's not American history or Canadian history, right? There's Caribbean history. There were some different classes than she was used to, and she wanted to have that opportunity to have that skill to go back to the States and be able to go to college. Right. Which, not saying that if you're in Belize schools, you can't go to college, because people do it all the time in the North Americas. They'll go to schooling in Belize and then leave to go to the North Americas. For school. That's a good point.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. I was going to say, and that leads me to another one I don't want to forget to ask you, and that's about the infrastructure. So if you're buying real estate in Belize, of course, people are going to want to know, what about, the Wi-Fi? And we have, FiOS, we have Earthlink, we have all sorts of different kinds of ways to stay connected. We're just talking about virtual schooling and even like what we're doing right now, we're, on the Zoom calls and doing these things. So talk a little bit about the infrastructure as it, especially as it relates to business and not only the internet, but I also am curious about any of the other kind of infrastructures that you can tell us about, from roads to, all the other things that someone would be interested in as coming to not only to invest in real estate internationally, but also if they want to live there and purchase real estate.
So this is a very good question. A lot of people are looking to, buy now and then move later, right? So buy at a lower point, have it as a vacation rental, and then move when they retire.
Exactly.
So Wi-Fi has become really important because, as you shared, a lot of people realize that they can work from anywhere.
Yay!
So why not work in their condo, looking at the Barrier Reef and go diving in the afternoon, right? So, there's a lot of options, but Wi-Fi is the big kahuna important thing out of all of that. When I moved to Belize, it was dial up and not solar, satellite dishes. And literally you would go to connect and then, you'd wait for ding, 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 and it would just wait and spin. And you could go outside and come back and mop your floors and go back and make a cup of coffee and then maybe be connected. Completely different. I was one of the first 10 people ever to be able to try DSL in the town of San Ignacio, because I was really, firm about, I need good internet. And so they actually got me I was able to test it out. Now we have actually very strong Wi-Fi all throughout the country. Most places you can go. And if there isn't a station nearby, you can get a little MiFi box and take it to if you're in the villages that are more remote, and actually get internet. So it's completely different. We are really connected now.
Oh, that's beautiful. And it's so interesting, because I think the whole world is more connected now for so many reasons. And that's one of the strange benefits of the pandemic, is that no longer were there excuses. We just you have to figure it out. And we need to have, internet in all sorts of places that we never did before, even just for not only for jobs, but for teaching, for schooling, for all sorts of things. So, and even health, as they call it now, the new word, telehealth. There are doctors who are like, it's not going to be possible to have you come into so I think it's going to be really interesting even to see how the future of Belize is. So I have so many questions, and I know the hour is going to run out really fast, but one of my other questions for you, about infrastructure. So I cut you off before you got to continue. So what about the roads, the sewer, water, all the other things that people go, I don't know if I'm going to have clean water, or, those kind of infrastructure questions?
These are very good questions. And part of the things that we look at when we're talking to someone, are they looking to be off grid, and are they wanting to have a well, or are they wanting to be connected to the city water and the town water? So they want to be closer to town. But we actually do have clean water, and we have town or village water, right? And it's not expensive, which is really good. And as far as roads and infrastructure, again, oh my goodness, even in San Ignacio, it's unbelievable. We have sidewalks in a lot of areas that we never had sidewalks downtown, which is really nice for us, because, it's safer, right? And we also have roads that are paved. And again, when I moved to Belize, a lot of the roads were dirt. And so the changes this is what I think is very impressive for me in Belize. I'm only about 2 decades into living in Belize, and I have seen changes of not only with road infrastructure and electricity, but also in how people are able to get supplies and get building materials and get certain products that we never could get before, right? There's ways to get Amazon to us. I mean, that's changed a lot of people's lives, right? Because remember, Belize, with only 350,000 people, we do not have the Starbucks and the Walmarts and the Home Depots. We just don't have those. But the nice thing about that is when you go into a store, you're going to know the gentleman behind the counter that's selling you your hammer. You're going to know the person in the store that's helping you find the eggs that you're looking for. It's just very intimate. I say that Belize is like a small town that's a whole country. I mean, the whole country is a small town. So, I can land at the airport in Belize City, and they'll already know in San Ignacio that I've landed.
Wow.
It's just we call it the coconut telegraph. It's just a very interesting country, very full of vibrance and intimacy. And there really aren't any strangers, because if you speak English and you go to Belize, we speak English in Belize. So you're automatically on the same level. You're not like, oh, that person's a foreigner. You really can't tell who's a born Belizean.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Such a mixed melt. And we have a huge mixed melting pot. Fabulous.
I think it's wonderful, because again, it's so nice to have such an international mix of cultures and just people in general. So the one question that I wanted before we turn it over and open it up to Clubhouse, any of the questions, and I do want to ask your mom about taxes, all the taxes from both sides. But I do first is the question that's probably the taboo question. And I know that as real estate agents licensed in the United States, we're always restricted on how we can answer this one. But I am curious on one of the biggest concerns anytime I've ever brought up Belize or anything that really going internationally. So often I have people who are just really afraid of the crime. And they're like, I don't know, how would I protect my house and how dangerous is it there? And how often do they, have violent crimes? And I'm just curious on how would you answer that?
Well, goes back to the very important part of having someone that you're working with that is your representative, that is signing that they have a fiduciary responsibility to you, and they're committed to telling you the truth. Because there are some areas, just like growing up near the Washington, D.C. area, I knew there's certain areas I'm not supposed to go to and that aren't ideal for me to go to, right? And walk the streets. But I do know that there's certain places in Belize that are the same, right? And there's certain locations that are definitely better for people looking to move. Some communities are better for children because of what's around for them to do in the other community of people, right? With children also. Some places are great for expats and retirees because they're all in that same phase doing the same things. And they stay very active in this community, by the way, that I'm talking about. They're always doing things, shopping, running to Mexico, taking boat rides, going fishing, it's phenomenal. So these things are really important to consider. And I always tell people that you want to know who your neighbors are, right? Yeah. Because neighborhood watches, we know, are very successful. You know your neighbors, people watch out for each other. And, that can be good or bad. I'm not hiding anything, but I can tell you when I first moved to Belize and I had my house, I came home and I had laid out on the clothesline a bunch of clothes. When I came home, the 2 clotheslines were empty. Oh, and I'm like, somebody really took our clothes? No. The woman next door had seen it had started to rain and came over, took my clothes all off, folded them, and put them on her front porch table. Oh my gosh. Here's what I'm talking about. The country is like a small town in the whole country, and very good people always know very good people, right? So that was my benefit, is I had David the Scotsman and certain people that really, Daniel Silva, the minister, certain that let me meet very good people that to this day still are the people that I rely on for good information to help others now.
I love that story because I don't want to take time away, but I have similar stories in the Caribbean where I thought something was really bad. And I was like, oh no, I can't believe someone stole blah, blah, blah. And then found out, a neighbor had done something that was a blessing, like folded your clothes and, is it going to rain? And we couldn't have you have wet clothes again because then they'd have to dry again. And, yes. Just not what we do here. We're neighbors. And I love that. Thank you for sharing that story.
It's interesting. It's been a great addition to the quality of life for sure in Belize.
Well, and I would love to ask you from your viewpoint, and then we'll ask your mother about taxes. So everybody always asks this question. So if you're a United States citizen and you want to go down to Belize and buy, say, for instance, a rental property, what are kind of the taxes that you're aware of from the Belize side?
Okay.
So taxes and...
So property taxes in Belize are negligible, in my opinion, because, literally we sold a 50-acre resort on the river, right? A resort on the river. And every year their property taxes are $250 a year. Oh, so property taxes are not going to be a very large holding cost for anybody. That's the wonderful thing, right? You might have a beautiful condo on the ocean looking at the barrier reef and might be paying $300 to $400 a year for the property tax. So that's the good news. As far as income on the rental itself,
that was my next question. Yeah.
The management company would work with you and they make sure that those are reported and paid for and give you the receipts, and all of those things are, very clear and white, black and white, which I like. And then your income in my mother can speak to this, of course, depending what country you're coming from, your country might require you to also pay taxes for sure.
Yeah, of course. America always loves that. Okay, Linda, you're up. So Linda, you are a tax guru, and we would love to hear from you as far as what are the tax benefits as well as just ramifications for an American purchasing property in Belize.
Oh, that's a great question. I've been there twice already to visit Macarena, and it really is paradise, especially if you go down there in January when you can get away from the Washington weather. Okay.
Amen.
Yes, the tax consequences. It's really almost identical to having a property in the United States. In other words, if it's your second home and you eventually sell it at a great profit, which usually everybody does, of course, the profit will be taxable because as a second home, you haven't lived in it full time 2 out of the previous 5 years. But if you buy something and you rent it out, whether it's all the time, or maybe you use it as Airbnb so that when you're not using it yourself, you're getting rental income, you still get to deduct the usual things. And those would include the important things like, well, the taxes, which are minuscule down in Belize, but also any interest on the mortgage, your trips there to keep it tidy and to keep it rented, of course.
Yay! Like your airline
yes.
fare, your travel expenses, your rental car, all that.
Yes, exactly. You're not allowed to deduct your food while you're there because I guess they figure you'd go there on vacation anyway, since it really is paradise. Maybe if it was up in the Arctic and you'd say they'd never go there, but for the fact that you had to rent out your property. But because Belize is a paradise, you don't get your food. But yes, all the days you spend on business, maybe you're going down to make repairs or improvements to your property, or to sign contracts, or to hire a wonderful realtor like Macarena and her folks at Keller Williams down there. Then, of course, those days spent on business are fully deductible for your lodging, and you may get to deduct your airfare also. But also, if you have to pay insurance on the property, and like I mentioned, repairs or improvements. And sometimes if you have some of her clients have large properties where you have to have a caretaker on site. So of course you'll pay somebody there to keep a watch on the property, maybe feed the animals that are on the property, and just to make sure that the electricity is running and the air conditioning is going. But it really is beautiful. I can tell you the wood down there is spectacular. Is that mahogany wood, Macarena, that I like so much?
Yes, it is mahogany that you love, and the Purple Heart.
Yes. Oh my gosh, they make beautiful things. And there's Mennonites down there who make furniture and grow vegetables. And you were talking, Jennifer, about your blueberries. Oh my gosh, the fruits down there are amazing. And I love fish. I'm not a vegetarian. I'm practically a pescatarian, though, because I don't eat a lot of red meat. But the fish down there, any kind you want, anytime you want, fixed any way you want. Oh my gosh, you can just live on the fish down there. It's fantastic. I'm getting off the tax thing. So basically the taxes are just about the same. And owning a property in Belize is no hardship because it's always a pleasure to visit there. I hope that helps you answer the question. That's Linda, over and out.
Thank you, Linda. And that does make me, I want to ask a question about, because I want to go to John in a second. So John, if you'll just hold on 1 second for me. One of the questions, the other thing was, I remember in the Caribbean, one thing that comes up a lot is trying to find good people to help when you need repairs on a property. So like, for instance, if somebody buys an investment property down there and all of a sudden, something needs to be fixed or repaired, maybe a storm came through or just any maintenance stuff that they need help. So how hard is it to find good people to help you?
So going back to my adage of saying very good people know very good people,
right.
To rely on those very good people from the very beginning will really set that up to succeed. And similar like we do in the North Americas, right? If we move to a new area, we're going to ask our friend or neighbor, or not even a new neighborhood. You ask your neighbor going, who did you use to put their tile work at? They did a great job. You're happy with them. So those things really do help. And there are fantastic people that can do really good work for you. And there are people that just don't want to tell you that they can't do it. And yet they're probably not the ones you want to hire.
Right. Oh, I think that's a great answer. Is you definitely, everywhere you go, you're always going to find that, because even in Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland, all in Florida, I mean, you want to make sure you find someone who can recommend a good painter, a good plumber, a good electrician, all those things. So, okay, John Lee is an investor, and he's here in the clubhouse with us. So, John, do you have a question for Macarena?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Macarena. This has been great. I love Belize. Only been there twice, 10 years ago. I love it. It's one of the things I did. I liked it so much as I came home, and here in the Midwest, I buy these little lots, building camping lots for about a couple $1,000, a couple hundred to a couple $1,000. I looked up some of the same size lots in some of the private islands, but they were like $50,000. And then you had to pay some of them. There were different amounts, but you have like an association where you'd have to pay, I don't know, anywhere from $50 to a couple $100 a month. I thought that was great, but transportation was interesting, and also I think you mentioned it. The $2 for $1 was something I had to keep in mind, because that's a whole different way of thinking. It's not twice as much, but it's just valued different. But anyway, Jennifer, you talked about the sleepy assets, and that's what it looked like, because there was no way if I bought something for $50,000, it was just going to sit there, and if I ever did anything with it. But now we have these vacation rentals. So I guess my question is, if someone like me wanted to look at some vacation rentals, what's the best way to get started right now? That's my question. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
So hello, John. Happy, beautiful day to you. Thanks for asking questions too. So I agree with you. Belize is beautiful, and there's certainly some good options now that there weren't before. As far as starting, I would say, well, hop on a call, find someone to speak to. I'm obviously available, of course, but find somebody that you can trust to bounce some ideas off of, and then get some proven numbers. And that's really key. So for example, you might find something on the San Pedro Ambergris Key Island, right? And it looks phenomenal. The numbers look phenomenal. And then you might decide that investment really makes good sense, because if you decide to buy land, it's still going to appreciate, right? But it's not going to make you any money until you sell it. Whereas if you buy an investment property, like you're speaking of, like a condo or something, you're going to make money in the meantime.
And I think that's the perfect thing. And also is, again, what I would say is it's really important to know the numbers and really look at, like, what has that asset performed at? Even now, that's one of the things when people come to Washington, D.C. and they let's look at the numbers. If that condo, has it been rented for the last 5 years? So, and that reminds me, we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you one last thing about short-term rentals. Because of course, like in Washington, D.C., we have the three, as you know, from the DMV, which is not the driver's license place, Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. We have very different rules as you go from state to state about short-term rentals. And as you probably, I don't know if you're familiar, but in Florida, it's even more fascinating to me that you have different variations where you can have daily rentals in some properties, but then also it could be completely restricted where you have to have, a minimum of a 3-month rental, or you can have weekly rentals. I mean, it's amazing how many different variations, of course, never mind all the taxing on it as well when you're in a state like Florida, because tourism, they don't have a state income tax. So you're looking at all the short-term rental taxes. So do you guys have restrictions there? And then also pull out your crystal ball and tell me, what do you think the future for short-term rentals is going to be in Belize?
So let's start to the first part of the question, is that the taxes, and as far as the implication of, short-term, if it's 3-day rental or a week rental or month rental, the difference is one needs to be registered as gold standard if it's a short-term rental. And there's a process to do that. And again, a very good management company will handle that for you. And if it's already a gold standard that you're buying, you don't have to redo the work, right? Which is really, that's an extra added bonus. But it has to be gold standard, which means there's certain protocols in place for short-term rentals. If it's a longer term, like a 3-month and onward, you don't have these same kind of standards that have to be followed. The taxes are about the same. So, and they're not very high, which is really good to know. You're not losing a lot of money in your vacation rental asset by paying it out in taxes. And Belize doesn't have capital gains per se. Of course, you have to see what country you're from if they have any capital gains, just like, Linda had spoke about. It's odd to call my mom Linda.
I know.
That was very odd to say Linda. But so those are things that are really important to think of. However, we had gone back to also, I think, what he had asked was the property for getting something that is just land itself. The property taxes are really tiny, and a lot of people are buying these lots on the ocean, near the ocean, a couple, 2 or 3 lots away, because there's development going around it, right? And those prices, we know in 2 or 3 years are going to do what? They're going to just multiply, which is very good. And I've seen the market be very steady for 17 years, that's an added bonus.
And so specifically, do you think that they will put more restrictions on short-term rentals, or is it something they just love because it brings income?
Thank you. That's that crystal ball question you had. Thank you for bringing that back. So I do not feel that they're going to bring more restrictions in by any means. We love tourism, again, is, our number one, viability of income, right? And we have a lot of reasons why people want to come to Belize for diving. I don't know why John came specifically, but a lot of people come for the diving because of the blue hole, the barrier reef. It's the second largest it's the second largest barrier reef in the whole world. And we're not a big country, right? Oh. And yet we have the largest living barrier reef because so much of our reef is alive.
Wow.
So it's a huge draw for people that want to snorkel and dive.
Yeah, and I agree, because in the Florida Keys, I watched, unfortunately, a lot of our reefs die. So I know what that means to have a live reef and to just be flourishing with all the fish and all the wildlife. It's just gorgeous. So I am so grateful. I always end my show with a yay. So I'm going to ask Linda and John to also say yay with us as we go off the air. And Macarena, if you'll stay around after we finish, I will do that. So John and Linda, if you guys will say yay, I'll do my 3, 2, 1, and we will all yay together. So 3, 2, 1, yay!
Hi, I'm Jack Canfield. You may know me as the co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. And if you want more help in getting from where you are to where you want to be, I want to encourage you to listen to the Jennifer Hammond Show